broadcasting live from the USCSS Nostramatu. This is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Seamus Connolly.
And I'm Dr. Acula Garrett Strother.
Count Strother himself. Ooh,
This is also, I think, the second week in a row I've opened with a dumb, I'm Dr. Whoever.
Oh, well, it's there for a reason. It's for you. I'm still shaky on my own podcast nickname. I'll get there one day. I've got the outro, though. I've got the catchphrase.
As long as we can slap something for each of us on a t-shirt, that's all that really matters.
Oh, no, we're looking at you, T-Public. We know you do weird podcast stuff.
But today, we are going to be talking about the new vampire romp, Last Voyage of Demeter. We're the only two people, actually, that have seen this movie, I think.
I think so.
First, we are going to get into one little piece of news, and there's really not much to it. Surprise, surprise, we've got a strike update, and again, surprise, surprise, not much movement has occurred. The SAG-AFTRA strike, there's no news on that front. Picketing is still going strong, but the AMPTP has returned to the negotiating table with the WGA, and on August 18th, studio heads all got together and convened to talk strategy about the ongoing strike. Presumably both WGA and SAG-AFTRA. Being back at the negotiating table is good. It's too bad that we couldn't follow up last week's WGA submitted their counteroffer with, yay, it happened, everything went through. But as long as the writers can get what they're asking for, that's really what is important here. So we'll be back soon with more strike stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, hopefully a little more actual update, but movement is movement, and it's good to see.
But without further ado, shall we take a good voyage to the movies, Seamus?
you were saving that, you ass. Let's do it.
For today's main segment, we're going to be talking about The Last Voyage of Demeter, which many of you may know colloquially as Dracula on a boat.
And Dracula on a boat it was, Garrett, and I kind of, loved it? Is that crazy to say? I think we both kind of agree that it was, like you were saying, we are like the only two people in the world to have seen this movie, but I feel like it should be catching fire right now. It's kind of a great late summer random horror thriller that I only really started seeing ads for it like maybe a week or two before it came out, and even then, all of the people that I have been talking to about it in the last day since we've seen it have just been like, doesn't even sound familiar to me. Like, that don't know that one. But I really hope that more people go and see it soon, because I very much enjoyed myself. What about you?
Oh, certainly me too. I've been excited about this one since it was announced, just because I have been a fan of Andre Overdahl since high school. I really like his film Troll Hunter, which we may come back to later on the show. And when I kept hearing more information about it, who was in it, Liam Cunningham, Corey Hawkins, I think we have to officially graduate to not calling him the Baba Yaga guy, because David Dastmalchian is too good in too many things for us to just keep calling him that and to not say his actual name.
David Dastmalchian, he kills it. Like, I always think that he's in too little of what he's in, but he's like a straight up big main character in Last Voyage here. And despite this movie being about like an Eastern European boogeyman style monster that he is up against, he is absolutely no longer the Baba Yaga guy.
I also enjoyed the rest of the cast, who were mostly new to me, though I have learned that Stefan Kapicic, the guy who plays Olgarin, is also Colossus from the Deadpool movies. So
is that right? Wait, like the first mate guy, like the guy who knows what's going on?
Yes, that guy.
That guy, he was so good. That is Colossus. That's so funny. He's great in those movies too. I actually very much enjoy him in those.
Even the interchangeable Merry and Pippin guy, like, I thought he was... the whole crew here worked for me.
The whole crew. Yeah, definitely.
This movie was definitely better than I was expecting it to be. I said I was excited for it, but it was definitely in more of a, like, dumb, campy B-movie way. And, well, this is definitely a dumb, campy B-movie, and I'm not trying to hold it to really standards higher than that, nor do I think it asks to be held to standards higher than that. But the lighting, the way it's shot, the straight-up gore in this movie...
Dude.
I was really surprised at how far this movie was willing to go, at how unsettling it was in a lot of different ways that I think we'll have to wait for spoilers to get a little bit more into the specifics of it, but I was thrilled. We've been doing the Meg movies lately, and we've been talking about, these giant budget monster movies that are just dumb fun, and this is how you do a B-movie, monster movie that is actually atmospheric and creepy and scary. Oh, yeah. It's something that I don't think we get as often as we should, and we've been also talking a lot about Kong Skull Island lately for similar reasons, and then, we've got Corey Hawkins from Kong Skull Island. He's here. He's playing the most educated guy in the movie yet again. And,
as always.
Mm-hmm.
And he is American, by the way. He is not British, even though he is quite good at it in this movie.
He did do a good British. I won't complain about that. He was killing it. And this movie is a lot darker and a lot scarier than something like Kong Skull Island, but I do think it's closer in actual quality to something like that.
I definitely agree. I feel like the last couple weeks here, we've been really exploring movies that we have lower expectations of, but in things like The Meg and Meg 2, The Trench, and The Last Voyage of Demeter, I feel like me and you keep coming back to the idea of, like, they're very clearly paying homage to a ton of other pieces of media before it, not even thinking about The Last Voyage of Demeter being based on the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, but the film influences of everything, and it not feeling hacky or tired, but, like, actually, like, there's some respect being paid to these other things that are clearly being drawn from to create something like the atmosphere, and it's horror. It's The Last Voyage of Demeter is a horror movie, and I feel like I was seeing a ton of Alien, The Thing, the things that are gonna definitely come up a lot more as we get farther into it, but I've been really enjoying this new brand of, like, modern monster movie culture where it's just not necessarily shying away that much from taking from the things that are obviously huge influences on it, but, like, really plussing them up in a way that feels earned.
And it's finding a fresh new way to tell those stories. And as much as I love the original Dracula novel, and also kind of feel like it hasn't been, from the adaptations that I've seen, properly adapted yet, as much, I love Bela Lugosi, he's great, but I think there are elements that are not fully realized in those kinds of adaptations, and I would love to see a full adaptation of Dracula done really well, but finding a new twist to make it more accessible to contemporary audiences, and also just, it would be one thing if they made a Dracula slasher movie and just left it at that, but they didn't. They went, okay, how do we really find a reason to make it a Dracula slasher movie? They went all the way back to the source material and said, well, here's an excerpt that we can build out and expand and find the edges of, and then play in our own little sandbox to make it a Dracula slasher movie, but also make it our own thing. I kept thinking a lot about, also, not that they are in any way similar, The Invisible Man, the Elizabeth Moss Invisible Man adaptation, and I think that right now, those are the sweet spots for adapting these classic Universal monsters, is we all are so familiar through cultural osmosis, if not directly engaging with previous interpretations of the characters, what these Universal monsters are all about. So using that to the filmmaker's advantage and playing with those expectations and crafting an entirely different angle to approach them from and imbuing a different genre onto them, because The Invisible Man is obviously more of a paranoia thriller than
Oh yeah, that's exactly the words I would use.
a straight horror film, although it certainly is a horror film. And similarly here, it's not so much a fantasy horror, although it's clearly there. It's taking that and approaching it from the angle of a slasher. And I hope that, despite the fact that, well, the pandemic really kneecapped Invisible Man despite its excellent critical reception, and this is not being super well received by audiences or critics, but you and I are crazy about it.
Yeah, it blows my mind to see those scores, dude. I really did not expect people to not like it that much.
I don't understand why, and I'm glad that you and I think, walk a very fine line. Not that we don't meta podcast too much in this way, but we are not dumb fanboys who are like, the critics, they don't understand what the masses like, and da-da-da-da-da. But we are also happy to disagree with critics. We certainly disagreed with critics about the Meg 2 last week.
Yeah, oh yeah. Sometimes people are judging films on things that are sometimes not even a criteria to judge a specific film on. I don't know. This is Last Voyage of Demeter. Is it the best movie I've ever seen? Is it even the best horror movie I've ever seen? Really not at all, but it was still, like I said, like a late summer sleeper. I think that if we can spread the word, we really should, because I would like to go see this again. I'm going to see it when it comes back on streaming for sure.
I completely agree, and this is one of those where I wonder, okay, if they had waited till Halloween, would it maybe be doing a little bit better? If they had marketed it slightly differently, I think Last Voyage of Demeter is a fantastic name, and it's integrated very well also into not only the themes of the film, but also, like, literally just the way the film is shot. It plays a lot with the title. You know, the meme is Dracula on a boat, and if it were maybe named something a little bit more accessible, that could also be helping it as well. But I'm not going to blame the movie for that, because a good movie's a good movie, and financial nor critical success are the ultimate measure of that. It's how you feel while you're watching it and the experience that the filmmaker takes you on. And I, for one, cannot recommend Last Voyage of Demeter enough. It is not for the faint of heart, but if you like slasher movies, if you like Dracula, I'm all for it.
I second that wholeheartedly. I was doing a little Dracula self-reflection as we were prepping this episode, and I realized that this is maybe the first actual full Dracula thing I've ever seen somehow, and obviously I know so much about Dracula, like you were saying. It's just like in the zeitgeist for the last 100 years. Like people know. This being my first full Dracula experience, and how ingrained in the source lore of the original Bram Stoker novel, that's got me really excited to go back and really dig into the century-long legacy of this character that I somehow have avoided up to this point.
Well, I very much encourage you to, and with October right around the corner, I think that you and I will be definitely embarking on a few vampiric odysseys.
Yeah.
And Dracula, I think, should be among them. But let's go ahead and talk spoilers on Last Voyage of Demeter, because there is a lot to talk about.
Yeah. We were kind of talking about the slow pacing and how they really, really take their time in the slasher zone out there. But the slow burn of getting bit by bit glances at Dracula until we see the full creature design of how he looks, and the Nosferatu skinny Smeagol Gollum creature that is just ripping people's throats apart, smashing multiple faces in this movie. It's incredible. I loved how he looked.
Yeah, and I almost felt like he evolved the way he looked throughout the film a little bit. Like,
oh yeah,
clearly the implication is that when he first comes out of the crate, it's not even an implication, it's just a fact that is told to us through the storytelling. He is weak when he first comes out, and as he feeds, he becomes stronger and more formidable. And I really liked the balance that they found between, like you said, he's this Nosferatu monster, but he's not just Nosferatu. He has bat wings, which Nosferatu doesn't traditionally have, and they found a lot of interesting ways to incorporate elements of vampire folklore with a slightly more realistic approach to what this monster would be like. And he is so unnerving to look at. You and I were both expecting, I think, him to be shown a little bit less than he was. But the way that they portray him, especially early on, where he's just this Gollum-esque, slouching, crawling, shivering, gray husk of a thing. And that is still absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, there's that first time we kind of get a better look at him, and he's like slithered up under the stairs on the deck of the Demeter, and it is really upsetting to see him just fully spring and lunge at. Was that the racist fellow who really wants his bonus? The
racist fellow who also is making eyes at our stowaway quote unquote friend, who we didn't mention up top. Pre-spoilers, but Dracula brought a snack along. Yeah, truly. I don't want to even know how late 1800s blood transfusions worked, but I'm pretty sure that's just not how it goes down. Maybe I'm a fool, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it goes down. I don't know either. It was pretty... she's in a box of dirt, just like Dracula, and putting the needle straight into her arm without cleaning anything. No skin cleaning, no nothing. And I'm like, I know it's 1870 and you don't know about germ theory yet, but my goodness.
But like, he's like washing his hands. It's like they have a sink for washing hands. He's a doctor, for Christ's sake. He knows.
Yeah.
Blood types, never heard of them. We're going straight in.
I thought that was a really smart element that I don't think either of us actually saw coming. That there was another person on the ship that wasn't Dracula.
They really do play with the Dracula hypno slave servant to the Count thing with a few different characters, but I thought she was gonna turn a little earlier, if I'm being honest. I'm glad she didn't, because she turned out to be a very fun part of the, the survival crew out there, but oh, she gets lit up. They fully burst into flames in sunlight. And I feel like I haven't really seen that in a vampire thing in a long time, of just like true, absolute, spontaneous combustion in the sunlight. That was tough to see.
It's very gnarly, and they do not shy away from it. And I think that's one of the moments where it feels the most like The Thing, is when they have people just straight up screaming, shrieking on fire.
Yeah, that is absolutely very much true. Including a small boy, might I say. I want to just throw that out there, is that they do something that I haven't seen in a horror movie in a long time, which is straight up kill the kid, which is insane that they do it like 3 different kind of ways in that movie.
Yeah, and not only do they kill him, but he becomes like this sickening zombie that is a vestige of evil. And that's very upsetting, because his father figure, Liam Cunningham from Game of Thrones, who I love to see doing stuff, I miss seeing him and stuff, as the ship's captain, is so distraught over the death of this boy Toby. And that little actor, he does a great job. Woody Norman, he was also in Come On, Come On with Joaquin Phoenix, which is a movie I heard really good things about and didn't see.
Well, yeah, he was a great. I usually, again, I'm not a huge fan of, the kid characters in horror movies. Sometimes they really get in the way of the flow of the horror, but this kid was right on, and it was truly unexpected that he was going to get got by Dracula himself before they stop his heart and he turns into a vampire and then bursts into flames. And then thrown into the ocean. Well, he's still maybe kind of alive a little bit.
And I really thought, you and I discussed this after the film, that if anybody was getting out of this scenario, it would be the kid. That they put the kid on a raft or a lifeboat while they fight off Dracula. And
that
everybody,
kid grows up to be a vampire hunter in like 20 years or whatever. Everyone thinks he's crazy, but he knows.
What we do get, I don't want to jump all the way to the ending, but I think one of the great pleasures and great surprises of this film was that there was a denouement, because frankly, I didn't think Corey Hawkins was going to make it out of this movie, and after watching his friend Anna burst into flame in the middle of the ocean, he makes it to shore and becomes a kind of backdoor Van Helsing who is chasing down Dracula in what is almost a setup for a sequel, but I think is really just a very thrilling way of playing with what we already know about the backstory of Dracula and the genre as a whole.
I mean, would I necessarily be upset if they announced a sequel? The Last Survivor of Demeter or some such play on that. Good. But I think it is just like a really fun, whimsical way to end this horror movie. It was like, is he hunting Dracula or is Dracula hunting him, Garrett? They're both kind of like on each other's trail out there in London, and it's not so much a happy ending, like, oh yeah, Corey Hawkins got out of it alive and he gets to live the rest of his life, Dracula free. It's just a really compelling way to end a movie with me wanting more. And again, that might just be because Corey Hawkins really kills it in this movie. Like, he's very, very good. But I wouldn't necessarily be upset with another one.
I love also, because it would feel really lame if it was just like, okay, time for the sequel, and it would feel kind of disrespectful to everything that happened over the course of the rest of the movie. And I like that it's so rooted in, to honor those who have died, I will devote the rest of my days to hunting him down and killing him. I was hoping that we would get to see Dracula in human form, because especially earlier in the film, she mentions that...
I mean, he's kind of in human form. He's still pretty nasty looking, I guess, yes, in the end there, but...
He looks more like Nosferatu, honestly, when he's in, like, his quote-unquote human form.
Oh, yeah, sure, in his big black jacket and stuff.
Mm-hmm. It worked. It felt grounded enough, and...
I almost took that as, like, he is in his human form, but Corey Hawkins knows who Dracula... Like, he can see through the lies of Dracula. He can sniff out, the monster, because he got cut on the neck for whatever... That seemed like they had more of a connection because of that for some reason to me at the end there. He, like, gives him a little wisp on the scar on his neck.
Subjective storytelling. I like it, Shane. That's an interesting interpretation.
I don't know. Maybe I want more, but I also maybe just want to rewatch this movie.
You and I think we're both like, honestly, if there had been a 10 o'clock showing, we very likely would have gone, I think.
Double up on Demeter. It's really good. I'm still going to be recommending this to everyone, even though they're just going to be like, that's not a real movie. That's not real. I don't know.
I also want to shout out Dracula's wolf cane, because Dracula, both in the book and in Nosferatu, is also a werewolf. He can also turn into a beast.
Is that
not
true?
Just a bat. Yeah.
What? That's insane. You should have done that maybe in this movie. That's awesome. I'm very green in my Dracula phase right now, but that is seriously kind of amazing. See, Garrett, there's more to do in another movie, damn it.
Well, but that's the thing also, I feel like they found a way to give him all of the Dracula transforming things without actually explicitly doing it.
That is true.
Because
bat wings, he grows them, like, turning into whatever, shape-shifting.
And even something like, it's unclear whether this is just, atmospheric weather happening, or if he has some control over it, but as we enter the third act, and all of the steam and mist rises, and that Dracula can turn into smoke as well, traditionally.
I didn't know that either. This man has so many powers. No wonder all these guys more or less got killed.
But the crucifix doesn't do him any good.
Yeah, I was a little sad about it. I'm always interested in how vampire stuff is going to do the crucifix thing, and oftentimes they just throw it out and they go like, you just been reading legends, that doesn't work or whatever, and they pretty much just did the exact same thing here with a cute little joke about tying up Liam Cunningham in like a Jesus pose on the wheel of the Demeter.
Which is also a reference to, they explicitly in the novel mention it's a subversion, but the captain of the Demeter in the book lashes himself to the wheel to try to control the ship, and he also has a crucifix in his hand to ward off Dracula.
Damn.
But he dies still.
He dies a pretty... he has a bad last voyage, that captain. He is...
I can't believe it's my last voyage before retirement, guys. Oh, boy.
I'm gonna pass it on to you, David Dastmalchian, my surrogate son, even though maybe the little kid is his grandson. He, like, mentions that he has a daughter before then later being like, I've got nothing to live for anymore, or whatever.
Yeah, that was really the one element of the screenplay where I was like, I guess that just didn't come back, right?
Yeah, unless we maybe just misheard and he has the grandson because his daughter is maybe dead and he's, you know, the actual parental figure for this boy.
And if I'm being honest, it doesn't really matter, but it was just a little confusing.
It doesn't really matter, but we clocked it and we were expecting a little bit of something out of it. So it matters just a little bit because we noticed it.
Interestingly, I think the movie that this is most similar to tonally is Overlord.
Interesting. Overlord.
Don't you think that there's a lot of Overlord-iness to this movie? Like, it's a kind of big budget, but not super big budget.
Recognizable, but not too recognizable in the cast.
Mm-hmm. And it's a gore fest that has a little bit of an action twinge to it. And I don't know.
Kind of semi-pseudo-historical. I know it's based on it's like fiction, but it's also like a period piece setting. No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. That makes sense to me.
And it's the same kind of like campy B-movie tone. Overlord is maybe more explicitly a campy B-movie, but I think like it balances the camp against the gore and
the hyper-violence.
Yeah.
Similarly. Oh man, yeah, they're slashing throats, they're smashing human faces into nothing. Huge bites out of everyone's neck, like classic Dracula style. I loved that. I'm
a little bit bummed that the cook, we didn't get to see him go out a little bit harder.
Yes, I wish Joseph, the cook, the super religious cook who won't feed anybody who takes God's name in vain, I wanted to see him go out a little more. He goes into the fog, and then we see his bloody rowboat get swished back to the ship, and he was like my favorite character, and I knew he wasn't making it out no matter what, but we also kept going like, all right, Cook's gone, Cook's dead, and then Cook just kept surviving until he proved himself a coward. His character was tarnished.
He's also the first person that reveals that Dracula can fly, because Dracula has to get over to the rowboat.
Yes, he's like, I'm off the ship, totally free and clear, out of here, Jesus has my back, Jesus take the oar. And then, bam, snatched.
So there is that element, you know.
That is true. He's part of a good reveal, but...
We were both surprised at the order in which the crew members died, and I think that is intentional to kind of keep us on our toes and subvert things a little bit. And be like, oh, I didn't think... You know, they make us really hate that racist guy, and then he's the first guy that goes out. And to be fair, he's one of the hardest guys that goes out. Like, it's he is still alive as Dracula is feeding on him and hurting him.
He gets like slashed in the legs and then pounced on at like truly like a nature film, watching a lion rip somebody apart. He's like looking into the camera as we close up on his open neck. They really get this guy.
But the Merry and Pippin guy I mentioned earlier makes it all the way. He's like the fifth to last guy.
Yeah. He and Volchek is David Dastmalchian's name in this. They say Volchek a lot.
They do.
they're like they're in the crow's nest together with rifles, like, all right, we're tied off, we're gonna make it out of here. Like, it's crazy that they make that guy almost seem more important than he is, because we know he's vampire fodder the whole time, but you're right, it's a surprising length in which he survives.
Also, I wanted to shout out, I didn't mention this up top in pre-spoilers, just because I didn't know, but Javier Bodet, who plays the Nosferatu-y Dracula himself, is also the Crooked Man. I don't know if you knew that.
Is that true? The Crooked Man from
Conjuring 2?
Conjuring 2, no kidding.
Who we talked about on that episode, and we're like, yeah, he just moves like he's stop motion. And obviously there's a lot more...
this is the Mama guy. Do you remember Mama?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no wonder. That is what I was thinking about when we were... Wow, God bless this guy. He's great.
And obviously this is a more mocap-y situation, but still, the physicality of that performance is coming through, and it is heightening a lot of the horror, I think.
The very few Dracula words spoken as he's like creeping around on his incredibly extended arms and legs. It's so memorable. It is so messed up. I love it. Those gnashing Nosferatu teeth. It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty unsettling. I think the only two phrases that I was able to make out were him saying "feed now" right before he turns Ulgarin into his little Renfield-y zombie guy. And then, of course, at the end, he says to Corey Hawkins, after Corey Hawkins says that he doesn't fear him, "You will," which is pretty hardcore.
Dude, that's every single yes, I love that, and that is another thing of like, I need Corey Hawkins to track this man down. This vampire, I need him to make good on that or get stomped. I don't know. So good. I would also like to maybe see the script of this just to see if maybe Dracula said more in the original idea of this, because I feel like I was expecting him to as he grew stronger. I was expecting a little more, not like monologuing or whatever, but like, you know, a little bit more verbal communication based on what Anna, the girl who's in the dirt box, is kind of talking about her history with, like, he is the lord and ruler of her village. I wanted to see a little bit more of that.
And like we discussed earlier, it's an interesting balance between he is clearly an intelligent creature, but he's also a little bit more monstrous than most versions of Dracula are. Again, there's so much Nosferatu-y, his look and feel, and something that we haven't brought up yet that I loved, and I feel like it's the only thing that I really knew from the trailer, because I intentionally was avoiding trailers from this, is the knocking that happens throughout the film as they communicate with each other, and the fact that about halfway through the slashering at the beginning, before we've really seen Dracula, when we realize that he has figured out the knocking and how to lure people with the knocking.
Dude, that was the best. I was a huge fan of that. Just true dread, that the foggy nighttime on the top deck shots where you just knocking from nowhere just starts tripping out characters. It's the best.
And the whole movie, I was keeping my eye on the carpenter shed in the center of the deck. Just being like, I need the shot of him standing up on top in the dark, but seeing that silhouette there. And they made me wait until the very, very end of the movie for it, but it was worth it.
It was so good. The pitch black shot of like, there's something out there. There's something on this ship.
Any more thoughts, Seamus, on The Last Voyage of Demeter?
Honestly, just insanely surprised at how enjoyable this movie was. I will definitely rewatch it. It's got me in the vampire mood, and again, this is like some of the first real pure vampire stuff that I feel like I've had in a long time. A lot of modern vampire stuff I feel like veers into like the sci-fi or the cryptid or the whatever angle of it is. It's not like pure weird evil magic Dracula, and this really felt like that with the perfect monster slasher twist. So I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, Overdall's kind of folkloric approach to any kind of genre that he tackles, I think, is an inherently fresh one, and I liked the way he was able to combine that with the influences of Dracula's past, and then also the other slasher influences. Like, also, this dog actor it's not The Thing or anything, but pretty good dog acting in this movie.
Like, for real, I thought that dog was acting the hell out of that role. Also, when you were saying that to me, like, it's The Thing or whatever, but, like, I almost also feel like they killed that dog and made its face look a little The Thing husky-ish, and I don't know if that was on purpose, but I really hope it was, because that is good stuff.
I think it has to have been intentional.
Right?
Just like every time we thought about Alien, it has to have been intentional.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Agreed. Good.
But let's go ahead and move on to more Dracula talk in our pop culture reference.
Let's do it.
For today's pop culture reference, we're going to be talking about the history of Dracula's screen adaptations. There are over 200 adaptations of Bram Stoker's Dracula in almost every form of media, from big-budget horror films and indie video games to graphic novels and children's television shows. The approaches to his portrayal have varied wildly over the years, and often reflect the state of the film industry during their time period. The first screen appearance of Dracula was in a now-lost 1921 Austrian silent film called Dracula's Death, which did not actually follow the plot of Bram Stoker's novel. The film was actually co-written by Michael Curtiz, who would later go on to be the director of Hollywood films such as Casablanca and White Christmas.
A more direct translation, and one of the most iconic incarnations of the story, came with F.W. Murnau's 1922 classic Nosferatu. A low-budget production that did not obtain the film rights to the novel, names and plot details were changed. Dracula became Count Orlok, and the novel's English setting was changed to Germany to be more accessible to German audiences. Despite these changes, Bram Stoker's heirs sued the creators of Nosferatu, and the court ordered that all copies were to be destroyed. However, a few surviving copies became massively influential, and the film is considered a seminal work of early horror.
In 1931, the first sound film adaptation of Dracula was released, starring Bela Lugosi, reprising his role as the Count from the Broadway show that the film was ultimately based on. The film, produced and distributed by Universal, was a massive success, spawned multiple sequel and spin-off films, and has become the pop culture baseline for what most people think of as Dracula. Bela Lugosi would also return as Dracula in the Universal-produced comedy Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1942, along with other recognizable Universal monsters.
In 1962, 50 years after Stoker's death, Dracula entered the public domain and led to a surge in new Dracula takes, both written and on screen. Some notable actors who starred in a myriad of adaptations during this period include Christopher Lee, Frank Langella, and John Carradine. The 1972 blaxploitation film Blackula, starring William Marshall, was a massive commercial success in America and helped pave the way for a mass of blaxploitation horror films, including a Blackula sequel the following year.
In 1979, German filmmaker Werner Herzog remade Nosferatu, with the integration of more details from Bram Stoker's novel since it had previously entered the public domain. The film was shot in many of the same locations as the 1922 original, and Herzog actually shot two versions of the film, one in English and one in German, to placate 20th Century Fox. Francis Ford Coppola tried his hand at adapting the novel in 1992 with Bram Stoker's Dracula, which explicitly put the story in historical context by portraying Dracula as Vlad the Impaler. In 1995, Mel Brooks produced the Leslie Nielsen-led Dead and Loving It, a parody of Stoker's original story which relied heavily on humor, but has been praised for its surprising amount of source accuracy.
The popularity of Dracula and other Universal monsters waned in the 21st century, but there were still a few poorly received attempts to resurrect the story on the big screen. In 2004, Universal reimagined their classic monsters catalog as an action-adventure film following Dracula's titular nemesis Van Helsing as a monster hunter. 10 years later, Universal rebooted the property again with Dracula Untold. It was slated to be the first entry in the Dead on Arrival Dark Universe, a cinematic universe comprised of Universal monsters. But after the film's disastrous critical and financial reception, its ties to the Dark Universe were cut, making 2017's The Mummy the first and only film in that continuity.
Earlier this year, Universal once again shifted the main character of a Dracula adaptation in the comedy Renfield, which starred Nicholas Hoult as the bug-eating servant of Nicolas Cage's Dracula. Ironically, ultimately the most financially successful recent adaptation of Dracula or classic monsters on film is the long-running Sony Animation children's film series Hotel Transylvania, where Adam Sandler plays Dracula.
Today's main segment, The Last Voyage of Demeter, is based solely on the Captain's Log portion of the 7th chapter of the original Dracula novel. As evidenced by the preceding overview, this is a new way in which filmmakers search for an angle to keep the character of Dracula fresh for contemporary audiences. Andre Øvredal and the other creatives behind The Last Voyage of Demeter clearly took influence from the Dracula adaptations that came before them, such as Nosferatu and Universal's original Dracula, as well as infusing tropes of the slasher genre, which specifically sway from films such as The Thing and Alien.
And it's incredible, with how long and how many adaptations we list in this pop culture reference, this is nowhere near comprehensive, and we are brushing over a lot of different interpretations of the character. But it really is a testament to just how much, not only does Dracula capture creatives and the masses' imagination, but there are so many different, really interesting creative ways that the story can be approached.
And I definitely, with my personal love of The Last Voyage of Demeter, I am very excited to dive way farther into this lore, this crazy branching different takes on this character. I'm very excited to get into the weirder ones, I feel like. Shout out to the Count on Sesame Street and Count Chocula, which are two of the only real versions of Dracula that I had experience with as a child growing up, besides, of course, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But I love now knowing more about how bloodthirsty and brutal a lot of these adaptations can be, that it is just also kind of a kid's character, that funny old Dracula.
The Count, not a vampire in the Sesame Street
What do you
canon.
mean?
He is vampire-like. He is not...
What? He's not an undead servant of evil in this kid's puppet show?
According to the internal documents at Sesame Workshop, the guidelines is that the Count is vampire-like.
I was just born with these teeth. Ridiculous.
Obviously, I think the idea is that, like, that's not what happened to Elmo's parents, you know? Like...
Sure. There's no mysterious disappearances on Sesame Street with neck-bite corpses? Of course not. But what do you say we go on and save the rec center?
Let's do a count.
You didn't want to match the point. Wow, whatever. Let's do it.
Save the rec center! Now it's time to save the rec center, where we bring you our weekly recommendations. Seamus, what do you got for us?
Well, this week I'm diving into my own vampire history here to bring this one out. I know I've rec-centered the TV show, and I know I've rec-centered the original before, but I'm here to rec-center from Dusk Till Dawn 3, Garrett, the third Robert Rodriguez Dusk Till Dawn movie.
There is no way that there are 3 from Dusk Till Dawn movies.
And you know for a fact it's 3 for 3 Danny Trejo is in these movies. I want you to know that. But this one, the third one, is a period piece cowboy western vampire movie, Garrett. Taking place in the middle of the Mexican desert in the original location of the Twister from the original movie. It's almost like Clue levels of corny, because it really is just so... Like, bank robbers need to hide out for the night. Literally the plot of the original From Dusk Till Dawn, but it's cowboys. They're in cowboy times, and they're in cowboy stuff, and they have cowboy guns. And it's really way better than the second one, which is a shame, because Robert Patrick is the star of that one, and I really wanted it to be better. But it's just a fun, stupid third movie in a franchise that no one even knows existed. and it really, it got me in the mood. Last Voyage of Demeter got me in the mood for more like, let's just plop vampires into a fun historical setting and see what happens. And I don't know if you remember much about the vampires in this franchise, but they are weirdly like pretty, right on, no sunlight, a wooden stake through the heart, can transform to and from like human form. It's like, they don't go too crazy.
It's still blowing my mind that there are Dusk Till Dawn sequels, let alone...
Oh, you didn't even know there was a second one?
I had no
Oh
clue.
my
I knew
god,
the TV
dude.
show. I've seen the first one, obviously.
They're obviously not as good as the original one, but it is still, like, if you want a more goofy version of a vampire period piece, then do Dusk Till Dawn 3.
I might. Honestly, that is
A little trilogy? I'll watch that with you. I'll watch the really bad second one with you. But what do you got to say of the Rec Center this week?
Well, as previously alluded to on this show, I will be rec-centering a film that I have liked for a very long time, which is Last Voyage of Demeter director Andre Overdahl's earlier film, 2010's Troll Hunter. This was recommended to me in high school when I was doing a article for the newspaper about movies that are so bad they're good, and I refused to put it in the article because I watched it and it was just good. I really had a great time with it. It is honestly the only found footage movie that I wholeheartedly defend, and I don't know why that is, if I'm being honest, because I don't think that the found footage element is particularly well used. I just think it's such a charming little film that it doesn't bother me, I suppose. I guess it's used less as a gimmick and more as just a form, if that makes sense.
Because Troll Hunter was 90s, early 2000s?
2010.
2010? That is way later than I thought. My god. I mean, there is a certain point where found footage stuff gets way overbloated with, like, post-paranormal activity. It's just like every camera has night vision and is like weird effects, and it feels way more fake. But if you could really pull it off in a even a semi-convincing way for people like us who know how cameras work, like handheld cameras, I feel like that goes a long way.
Honestly, you know what it really probably is, and this is kind of the first time I've really articulated this. It uses the found footage really well to make the trolls feel real and to feel like we're in like not only to understand the scale of them and the proportion, but to put them in a more realistic feeling space. It also probably covers some low budget CGI.
Oh yeah.
But it's charming. It's not particularly scary, but it's a good time. It's a quick time from what I remember. I think it's 95 minutes if it's anything, I would guess. It was a Netflix staple back in the day, but I think you can only find it on like Hoopla now. But if you are interested in seeking it out, if you enjoyed Last Voyage of Demeter, I encourage you to do that if you have Hoopla through your local library. Otherwise, it makes the streaming rounds. I've seen it on Peacock before. It'll come back to something that you have.
Well, I am very interested in this because you know me. I am actually a very much an enjoyer of found footage. And I've heard about this movie for years. Like you were saying, it's the one movie Netflix had when it hit streaming, so I'm definitely familiar with it. But I'm so impressed by Last Voyage that I think I will definitely pull the trigger on that the next time I see it make the rounds on whatever services I'm looking at.
I'm glad. But I think that wraps us up for this week's episode of Pop Culture Reference. If you want to reach the show, you can find us at PCR_podcast on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. You can email the show at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com. You can like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, engage with us in any way that you can. Next week, we will be going back to stark reality as we endeavor to cover the premiere of the anticipated Disney Plus
Someone's
Star Wars,
anticipating it.
Yeah. Original series Ahsoka. I'm excited for Mary Elizabeth Winstead Hera. I'm excited for live action Chopper. I do not have particularly high hopes, but I hope to be proven wrong next week.
You know what? Me too. I'm looking forward to it. I feel like I've had my cool down since Mando and stuff, so I'm I'm going in with high hopes, and maybe that's my mistake, but we will find out about that next week.
Well, everybody, Spectre 2 out.
Adios, amigos.